Hello, everyone. I'm Susan Dean Smith, Associate Professor in the History Department at UT Austin and co-organizer with Dr. Rosario Inez Granados of the Distinguished Visiting Speakers Series in the Art of the Spanish Americas. A very warm welcome to everyone here this evening to the first webinar in our cycle for 2021-22. The Blanton has been organizing these Distinguished Visiting Speakers Series since the spring of 2017, with the objective of drawing attention to the art and creativity of the Spanish Americas, not only across here at UT Austin, but also to broader communities and with the help of Zoom globally. Before we begin our session this afternoon, we would like to acknowledge the support of the College of Liberal Arts, the College of Fine Arts, and the School of Architecture at UT Austin in all of our endeavors. Our moderator for tonight's topic, Colonial Latin American Foodies, is Dr. Rosario Inez Granados, who will now introduce our special guests, and welcome again to everyone.
Hello, Susan. Hello, everybody. Thank you so much for being here with us. It's really a pleasure to be in this first panel of our series. For Susan and I, it has been very important to extend the conversations about the colonial period into the art, and we are now expanding into the food, because we thought that it was the best way to bring awareness of a historical period that has been very contested for centuries, and it should be. It's a period that is full of contradictions and full of abuse, and so we thought that it would be interesting to rethink about what the colonial period is, with the foods and with the cultural processes that happened on the table in a similar or different way, perhaps, that it happens on canvas or copper or any other artistic media. But before we start and I introduce our speakers, I have a few notes for you. Your audio is muted, so no one can hear you, and only the panelists are visible on the screen. Closed captioning is available by clicking the live transcript icon at the bottom of your screen. We'll be taking your questions from the Q&A window. Just click the icon below to type and send your question to us. I will be able to read some of those questions just after our speakers are done with their presentations. Feel free to make comments in the chat window, but please ask your questions through the Q&A box, which is the one that I'm going to be checking. Tonight's event is being recorded and will be available at our website and YouTube channel roughly 1 week from today. So please share the word that we're going to keep this fabulous conversation and very tasty one into the posterity. So I'm going to ask our speakers, Iliana de la Vega.
Hello.
And Rosario Olivas Weston, joining
Hello.
us from Peru, to say hi. And now I'm going to read their bios and enjoy their presentations as much as you will do, I hope. We're going to start with Iliana because we decided to do geographical session. And so I'm going to start with the North and then go to South America. Iliana de la Vega is the chef and owner of El Naranjo, a restaurant famous for its interpretation of Oaxaca cuisine. Founded along with her husband, Ernesto Torrealba, in 2012, it was recognized by Texas Monthly as the only real Mexican restaurant in Texas. Iliana was chef instructor at the Culinary Institute of America from 2007 to 2012, and she is a 2019 James Beard Award semifinalist for Best Chef Southwest and 2020 James Beard Award semifinalist for Best Chef in Texas. I'm very happy to have a local chef joining us for this conversation and to learn from her more about the origin of many of the foods that are considered very important and key in Mexican culture. Thank you, Iliana.
Thank you, Rosario, and thank you all for being here and joining us. And I'm very honored to be in this conversation today with with Rosario and all of you. I would like to start my presentation with a few slides on a PowerPoint. So to talk about Mexican food, I guess we have to go back to the pre-Hispanic or pre-Columbian times. So we have here a slide of how was the food back in the day. So we can move to the next one. Thank you. So some of the things that Mexico had given to the world and are the basis of our cuisine. Obviously very, very important is the corn that many people don't realize that is a Mexican ingredient. And it was, kind of discovered, created in Mexico. So it is, I guess, the backbone of the Mexican cuisine. The corn, it was domesticated in Mexico. So from a grass, very simple grass, we get this ingredient that it has, overpopulated all the world. Can you imagine a day without corn? I can't. And then obviously also beans. And then, thank you. Also other staples that we have shared with the world, like tomatoes and chiles, all kinds of chiles. There were three basic areas for, like kind of the birthplace of many ingredients. And for the chiles, one was in Mexico, south part of Mexico, Mesoamerica, and then also the Amazon basin. So Peru is one of those two. So we have lots of chiles. We have avocado. Imagine the world without avocado, what it will be like the Super Bowl right now. And obviously squashes and many other ingredients, like if you can help me, Justin, a little bit with the next slide. I'm not too good with the Zoom nowadays. Also cacao, even though originally the fruit, the cacao is coming also from Brazil and the Amazonian basin. It was domesticated also and used as a drink in the Mayan world. So that's part of Mexico. And vanilla, nobody can think sometimes about the vanilla that is also a Mexican ingredient. And that is Norma Gaya from Papantla, Veracruz, showing her vanilla, that is a family-run business over there. Okay, the next one. So we have our own utensils, back in the day. So that, really describes that it was a culture around the food. So we have pots and clays and the metate and the molcajete and the comales and everything else like that. The next one, Justin. Thank you. And then we had, obviously, there comes the conquistadores, and they brought from Europe, like very important things such as the wheat and meats and chicken and goats, and then more from Europe, like all the citruses. Obviously, the citrus are more from the Asia area, the place. But anyway, we got them through them, and also other things like plantains and many others. No, you're fine. Thank you. And European cooking utensils, because we didn't have iron or metal or ceramics. So also that was brought by the Spaniards. And for the next one. Okay, and also, it was not only the conquest, but the other conquest, which is the evangelization. So through the religion, they also brought, God to the indigenous people of the Americas. So that was the other way to get around. And many of that was through the food. In the colony, we can see, there was a market, a painting of a market day in the New Spain. So it was part indigenous, part, Spaniards, and it was just beginning the mixture of both. So this is very important too, the trade belt, what I like to call it. I don't know if it has really a name, but it was the crossing between Europe and Asia. And it was, between Acapulco in the Pacific and then Veracruz in the Gulf of Mexico. So they were bringing things like olives, olive oil, almonds, and raisins, and all those things through, from Spain through Veracruz, and going, crossing Mexico, the narrowest belt, and then going to Acapulco. And from that area was coming spices, from the Orient. So that was obviously, through the Manila galleons. So that's the next slide. Okay, I missed it, whatever. Anyway, sorry, I guess it was my mistake on putting this together. So we got like cinnamon that is very important in the Mexican cuisine. We have tamarind, we have other spices like clove and black pepper coming off also from Asia. And on the wealthy houses, I mean, the kitchens were very important area for cooking. And they were like, but they were kind of isolated from the main house, at least in Mexico, that was the way. So the ladies, the owners of the house, that were in charge of the kitchen, but they have obviously servants, slaves, maids, whatever you want to call them. By the day, I guess they were most like servants, and they were cooking their own things while the Spaniards were putting their own things together. And the kitchens later on were, led into the hands of the service. And it's interesting because there were no records of the 16th century cooking manuscripts. There was no trading, like no written records of if they were, doing this thing on how the food actually really mixed into just one food. And also there were the convents, don't forget that there was very important part and role that the nuns were playing. They were the daughters of the wealthy families too. Some of them get married, but others ones they were sent to the convents. So they were wealthy ladies with, good dote, as we say in Spanish, money that they were coming to the convent with, or sometimes their families send them foods with them. But they were interacting also with the indigenous people that they were cooking for them, as we can see actually pretty clear in that picture. So they were making the tortillas and the tamales, and they were having their own ingredients. So like, why don't we put together things? I guess that was how the mixture and the fusion came in. So fusion came, and the chocolate, it was more into the sweet side and mixed with milk. So get the drink, and then they had also like all the ingredients from Spain. They have lard, they have pork, and they have chiles too, and they have, all of those ingredients get together and really created, in that time, in the colonial period, actually what we can call now the Mexican cooking. So addition of meats to the native dishes, for example, tamales before, they were existent, even before the tortillas, they were making tamales. But obviously they didn't have any lard, and they were more simple with vegetables and things like that, maybe some worms if you like, or something like that, but definitely not with pork, not with lard, not with almonds and raisins and all those other ingredients that came later and, create what we had. We have another picture here of a pozole that is, made with corn, native corn, the cacahuacintle, when it just like pops up and opens up like a little flower. But of course, it was more simple dish because they didn't have the pork or the chicken or any of those things. Thanks. Here we have a beautiful picture of the convent of Santa Rosa in Puebla, which is supposed to be the place of origin, the birthplace of the mole poblano, for example. So we had another slide here of the mole poblano. It was offered, the legend is beautiful and refers to the dinner that the nuns created for the Marqués de la Cerda y Aragón, Conde de la Laguna. And when a nun, Sor Andrea de la Asunción, was cooking a dish, making, with a turkey, obviously a native animal from the New World. And she was cooking it, adding almonds and adding this and that and cinnamons and sugar and such. When a holy wind, that's a legend says, a holy wind blew in the kitchen and threw a lot of spices like chiles and other things into the pot. So obviously it was too late to change anything because the guests were arriving. And she had to serve it. And of course, everybody loved it. And it's like the mole poblano was just, created at that moment. Of course, that's a beautiful legend. Obviously, I think it's not true, but it was more the mixture in the convents of the native ingredients with the Spanish ones, and trial and error ended up in having a delicious dish that is almost like an emblematic, an icon of the Mexican cooking. And chocolate. So there was, it was the penance and the sacrifice for one side, and then the indulgence for the nuns too. So we have the chocolate that it was, the ladies were so in love, the colonial ladies, with the chocolate, that they decided to, go to the church and be in the mass drinking chocolate until, the church actually had to forbid that from happening. They were forbid to drink chocolate in the church. I thought it's a great idea. Why not, while you're in the mass, having your chocolate drink over there. And we have many other dishes that come also from the convents, like the more moles. There was not just one mole. I will be offended in Oaxaca if not mole negro was accepted. They have pipianes and different ollas podridas. That is the next slide. So olla podrida, or also known as cocido or puchero, with meats and vegetables and everything gets together. And it's actually quite a Spanish dish, but with the addition of the corn and addition of the squashes, like the chayote and sometimes we use the big calabazas, the pumpkins, into those dishes. And potatoes coming from Peru, but we also use them in Mexico. And more sweets like the cajeta, which is the goat's milk caramel, and different sweets. Remember, the nuns were, isolated. Many of them, they were silent nuns. So they have all the time to, like cook and do different things in the kitchen. That was the only area that they could have fun, if you will. And obviously, I guess they were fat, all of them. I don't know, but that's my guess, that they were, a little fat by trying all these desserts and different things and cooking all day long. And more like the rompope, which is an egg yolk drink with the alcohol that is super delicious. But they were maybe a little bit drunk too. Why not? It's like similar to the eggnog. And well, we have here another painting of Sor Juana Inés de la Cruz, the Mexican poetess. And she was, like cooking at the same time as, writing, and it was just so much intelligence in only one woman, that she can do a lot of things together. And okay, there was time of changes. So by this time, the people were tired of being abused by the Spaniards, and without getting into much of the politics at the time, there was obviously, declared the independence. So it was called for the Cry of Independence, was September 15, 1810, and it was granted on September 27, 1821. So it took, some years of that, but you're fine. During the times, there was also another dish was born, which is the famous chiles en nogada, and it was in Puebla, and it's supposed the origin is to the convent of Santa Monica, and it was the date was August 28th, and it was in 1821, and it was in honor of the General Iturbide. So it has the three colors of the flag. So we have the white coming from the walnuts, peeled walnuts. This is the most painstaking dish that you can ever imagine. We have the pomegranate that is, the red color, and then also the parsley that gives the green, along with the chile that is also. It was a seasonal dish, so everything was in season, and that's correct. The season is just over in Mexico and everywhere. So unfortunately, you have to wait for next year, either here or in Mexico, to taste the chiles en nogada, because otherwise you won't have the best walnuts all peeled and everything else, because when they are dried, it's very hard to remove the skin. So another beautiful, very Baroque, I will say, dish. The filling is made with different kinds of meat. Normally it is pork and beef. And you had inside like raisins and almonds, tomatoes, and fruits like peaches and apples and pears, and many other things. And one very important one, that is the acitron, which is a cacti that it has been candied, and then it's now in extinction. So we should try not to do that. I sometimes replace it with candied pineapple, because I want to respect the prohibition of using it, but it's hard, really hard. Okay, for the next one. The first recipes, this is very interesting, I think. The first recipe is called Mexican recipes, appeared for the first time in books printed in France in 1830. So before that, there was no knowledge really about Mexican food by itself. Even it says El Cocinero Mexicano, there were just a few recipes that really call for the Mexican food, like we know now, the Mexican food. I guess it was it was cooking. It was on the process to be recognized as a cuisine. And it comes El Porfiriato, which didn't help at all a lot. You know, the Porfirio Diaz as the president, he was a Oaxacan president. He was born in Oaxaca, but from a very humble origins. But he considered himself more French, I think. So if you see the menus or the menus that they were served by then in the in El Castillo de Chapultepec and the palace then, it was more like French food. So they were serving caviar and they were serving champagne and French wines and, you know, foie and all those things. So nothing Mexican at all. So by then it was kind of the, what do you prefer, eat wheat or eat corn? So the wheat was more approved by the Spanish, but every Mexican, you know, by then it was more mixture. Everyone was eating a lot of tortillas, but if you were presenting yourself, it was more like a wheat, if you prefer to be more considered like European, if you will. And it comes the revolution 100 years later now. And there were these ladies that we have to, you know, dedicate a little bit of time to them very quickly. And the soldaderas and adelitas, the soldaderas were, you know, accompanying their men through the revolution, and the adelitas were carrying food. So they have their anafres, you know, a little thingy for, you know, cooking, and comales and the corn, and they were grinding the corn. Imagine carrying all that in your body, you know, the metate, because there were no other ways. There was no maseca in a bag. So carrying all that, grinding the corn, cooking the corn, making tortillas, making all the food for the men that they were fighting for the, you know, for the revolution. More adelitas. So here's, I mean, they were right there, like cooking and doing all the things, the work for, you know, feeding the soldiers for the revolution. And then a little bit later, after the revolution, you know, there was a job description, if you will, and it was the enchiladera. So she was doing enchiladas only, and it began to show up, you know, the streets, antojerias, where they were cooking, you know, little things. And this is still, you know, in nowadays, when you have you know, molotes in Oaxaca or bocoles in Puebla or things like that, they were like little stands on the street. They're making quesadillas, they're making empanadas or sopes or something like that. They just dedicate themselves to do essentially one thing only. They may have different feelings, but it will be like, if they do quesadillas, they will be just doing quesadillas. If they do empanadas, that will be only that. So those are the antojerias, just for the little whims that we can have, the antojitos. And, you know, from 1930 to 1970, foreign was better than domestic. So everything that it was imported, it was always considered like a high class, a better recognized for the people. It is hard to say this, you know, being a Mexican, but I was growing up in, you know, close to the end of this years. And there were basically no Mexican restaurants in Mexico. You have fondas, but not a restaurant. You have, you know, you eat Mexican food in your home, but you didn't go to restaurants to eat Mexican food, essentially. So it was a little bit different how was, you know, the Mexican food was presented. And well, government projects around health and traditional diets began to support, you know, supported by cookbooks, TV shows, newspapers, and magazines, began to make that transition. They were supported by, you know, different, you know, government instances and TVs and such to be kind of like, okay, we have all this food, let's start using it and, you know, making it more affordable for the people. So, you know, it was a push into that direction of, you know, turning our faces into the local, into what we have, where is our tradition. And then finally, this is a very important thing in Mexico. In Mexican cuisine was designated as you know, intangible cultural heritage by the UNESCO in 2010. So it was the first cuisine designated with that high rank. And of course they do it when we get one of these things, you know, it's obviously an honor because they're recognizing the work of the people. They're recognizing the inheritance, you know, the intangible heritage of a country, of a place or something. But it's also because it's in danger. So yeah, we are, you know, since 2010, even more effort has been put by chefs and cooks and everyone else that is interested in you know, keep these traditions alive, to preserve the Mexican cooking as it was. Of course, there's evolution, there are many other things, but also to try to, to keep all that also intact in a way is also very important for us.
Rosario Olivas is a sommelier, a sensory analyst, and researcher and teacher in the history of Peruvian gastronomy. She is the author of several books, including La Cocina de los Incas, published in 2001, and La Cocina en el Virreinato del Perú in 1996. Many of her publications have been received Gourmand World Cookbooks Awards, and in 2006, she received the prestigious Manca Award from the Peruvian Ministry of Education. Rosario was also president of the Peruvian Academy of Gastronomy History. So it's really a pleasure to have you. And I really thank you also for doing this presentation in English. And I'm ready to leave you the virtual stage. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Rosario. It's a pleasure to be here. Let me share the screen, please. Okay, perfect. I am going to talk about the food of Peru at the colonial time. And in these three maps, you can see the territory of the Incas on the left. Is very important, the last pre-Hispanic culture. In the center, the territory of Peru in the 16th century, and on the right, the territory of Peru in the 19th century, the time of the independence declare. The Incas was the last pre-Hispanic culture spread through the current territory of 6 countries. On the side of the roads, there are 2,000 of tambos or logging place where people can eat and sleep, and also thousands of food stores called colcas. That's why the basic pre-Hispanic meals were dry food. That is why the Incas eat several vegetables, stew, soups, creams, porridge, and chicha, a fermented corn drink. I am going to mention some of the popular food in the Incas' time. The patasca or pozole, very popular. Their pesque or quinoa. Their nabos jauja are the potatoes with green herbs. The guatia was the potatoes cooked with hot herbs. People eat this in their harvest of potatoes. And June 24, that is the day of Cusco, is very popular. And also their sanco or polenta made by corn meat. One of the questions of the public is indigenous food of the Americas that transform on the West. Immediately, I think in 2 foods, potatoes and the sanco or polenta. The humitas are pre-Hispanic. Is the corn pasture wrapper in corn leaf. The origin was in the culture Chiribaya before the Incas. And you can see the archaeological humitas. I will answer another questions of the public. Their tamales is Mexican. It's a corn pasture with a filling. In Peru, we eat different kind of tamales. In the colonial time, came to Peru, and all the 24 regions of Peru have his own tamales. Their humita is different, not stuffer, but in some regions, like Lima, for example, You can stuff it with chicken or cheese. It is fresh corn pasted, wrapped in corn leaf. The Brazilian pamora is similar to the humitas, but the acasa is a ritual meal of candomblé of Bahia cuisine. It's different. It is made by rice, coconut milk, heavy cream, and wrapped in banana leaf. It's like more as like a pudding. Francisco Pizarro arrived in Peru in 1532, 40 years after the discovery of America. The first culinary fusion were a Spanish meal made with native food. Because if they don't eat the native food, they died. Let's see some examples of this fusion. Lima beans becomes lima bean salad. Potatoes, for example, donuts, potato donuts. The chuño or dry potatoes, very popular, is used to make a sponge cake. With the Peruvian beans made sweet of beans called frijoles colados. The Inca cuisine is still using now in Peru and also in colonial time. You can see at left a kitchen in the Santa Catalina convent at Arequipa, and on the right a kitchen of the Museum of Incas in Cusco. In the colonial bakery of the convent of Santa Catalina, the pre-Hispanic batan is used to grind the grain. In the colonial time, the chicha taverns become very popular. The owners gave free food in small plates like tapas to the customers to make that they buy, drink, and buy chicha and drink more chicha. The business of this kind of taverns was the sale of chicha. Many food of the Spanish was copied in Peru. The pot, bread, the wine was food of every day. Instead, the roast meat was eaten in special occasions. The sweets, many of them was copy of sweets of Spain, with some change in some case. The street food copy from the Spain street food. The most popular drinks in colonial time was pisco, brandy, wine, Paraguayan mate, and Mexican chocolate, of course. And there are some painting of banquets. This is the tree of life in the church of Guaro in Cusco. In the tree of life, we recognize the bread, the knife, the glasses, the bottles, and the Guinea pig roaster. The Guinea pig was highest valued food since pre-Inca time. And now Bolivia, Peru, Ecuador are the biggest consumers of Guinea pigs. Here, a moche bottle that is after the culture of the Inca represents a Guinea pig. Another bottle represents a bowl with guinea pig on the top of another bowl with corn. In the South America was very, very valued, the guinea pig, that there are several pictures of the Last Supper of Jesus with the guinea pig instead of lamb. At Cusco, at Lima, at Cusco, on the left, and Quito on the right. And in colonial time, several dishes was invented. For example, the adobo arequipeño and adobo cusqueño is pork cooked in chicha. The chicharrones is fried pork with corn and onion salad. All kinds of potato with chili sauces and hard-boiled egg and olive. Of course, la jalea, or fish and seafood fried. Their anticuchos, brochetas with potatoes and corn. Rice with duck, the native duck with rice. The mazamorra morada was a pudding of purple corn. And now I will answer another question of the public. One person write, I teach Spanish at a college level. I always have to mention to my students how sophisticated is Mexican and Peruvian food. My Peruvian grandmother used to spend hours to prepare some dishes when there was a party at home. Please talk about species used during the colonial time. Well, the base of all meal during the colonial time are garlic, onion, red pepper, yellow pepper, tomatoes, and salts. They was grown and then fried in lard. 1 or 2 tablespoons of this pasta was used in every meal. In the modern time, it's different, the pasta. It is garlic, onion, red pepper, yellow pepper, cumin, salt, and peppers, fried in vegetable oil. And we have five different pastas that we use in all our food. All the basic pasta, the 5 basic pasta, have a chile amarillo, ají amarillo, because this kind of chile give color, flavor, aroma, and it's very, very easy to get out the spicy. This is the famous ceviche, fish marinade in lime juice, one of the most famous Peruvian food. And now I have another question of the public. How do you recognize an authentic Peruvian ceviche? What is the difference between Peruvian and Mexico ceviche? It's very easy. The Peruvian have a lot of different kinds of ceviche. The Peruvian are very creative. Each person and each restaurant have his own recipe. And their authentic Peruvian recipe is recognized by his flavor. The ceviche has three different types of chili peppers. The Peruvians, ceviche, the yellow chili or capsicum bacartum give color, flavor, and aroma. The limo or mochero chili or capsicum chinense give a very strong aroma, and the rocoto or capsicum puberense give the spice. You can take away for the children or for people who don't like too much the spicy food. Another question of the public is about the evolution and the creativities of the ceviche making. The ceviche was always changed, always. 200 ago, on July 28th of 1821, the General José de San Martín declared the independence of Peru. All the patriots sing the chicha, a very popular song. This song is in the National Library of Peru. For 10 or 20 years, people sing this song in the taverns of chicha. The song says, the patriot reject the Spanish drink. The patriot prefer the chicha of corn or peanuts. They like the yellow chili. They said that is heavenly, this chili. The patriot eat ceviche, fried fish, guatia, and the chupe of quesillo, that is a soup of potato with cheese. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Rosario, for your presentation. And I wonder if we can ask Justin to play a little bit of that song that you just mentioned, to have a sense of how the arts come together. El chupe quesillo. We're going to have to leave it there, Justin. So we have at least 15 minutes of conversation. But I think it is very interesting how both of you talk about the relevance of food in identity, in how it became really important for people to relate with food in the independence, with the chile en nogada and this song that shows how patriotic you are if you eat chicha and not other drinks, and now the chile en nogada. But one thing that I found interesting in these two presentations, very, very tasty, both of those, is the relevance that women play in making all these foods. We tend to think of women, in the convent, praying all the time and, being very devoted and regulated by men. But we see that at least in the kitchen, they were a bit more free, to do their things. And we know that one of the sources we have to know all these recipes are the cookbooks that they prepared. So I don't know if you can say something more about the role of women in food making in the colonial times, of course, as heirs of the traditions of pre-Columbian cultures that you both also mentioned. But
well, I will say, at least Mexican cooking is it's a women's food. I mean, since pre-Columbian times, the men were growing the corn, and the women were in charge of making food out, from it. So it has been always, and then it comes the convents and it comes the service and everything, but it's a women's, food. Eventually the men take over and decide that they were the chefs of the restaurants and such, but that came way, way later than that.
In Peru, in pre-Hispanic time, the women cook and also sell in the market.
Mhm.
And in the time of colonial time, also the women was the cook and also sell in the market.
The market.
The chef began later. We have different kinds of chef. The viceroy have his own chef also. They came with his chef, but we don't have recipes, cookbooks. The first cookbook was in 1895, and you can find all the food that we eat now. We can find in this book.
That's very interesting, because we have cookbooks by nuns in Mexico, right, Iliana?
Yeah, they are supposed, like, for example, the Sor Juana Inés, there are recipes that are attributed to her, but definitely it was not like exactly written by her. So either she passed the recipes to someone in the same convent at the same time, but it's not like a book that she wrote directly. She talks about food and she was cooking. So, well, there is always, like the discussion there that if it's really from her or not. But yeah, we have, as I mentioned, some of the books. We have El Cocinero Mexicano, we have all those, but they were essentially, at the beginning, at least, they were printed in France.
That's
not in Mexico.
very interesting.
Yeah.
Because I think also with Peruvian food now happens, no, that is the recognition of Peruvian and Mexican food outside is what is making this huge boom of Peruvian and Mexican food. No, it's the outsiders bringing more attention to this. I have two questions, and I just want to say that the questions that Rosario was referring to are questions that we received in advance, and that's why you didn't know. She prepared them accordingly. But she has two more questions, and someone asks, probably the foods served at the chicherias were salty, so they could buy more chicha. Can you say that?
Yes. The typical food of the chicheria was ceviche and jalea from Lima. And in other place of Peru have other food. But ceviche was very, very important. Since that time, was the very old information that we have about the ceviche. Many 100 years since appear in other countries, and about the books. The name of the books was La Mesa Peruana, 1867. Have a part of Peru of the typical food of Arequipa and also from Lima, and the cookbook of the food of Lima was Manual de la Cocina Peruana in the 1895. But there a study of an history, one person who studied the convent of Santa Clara, and with how many spend in the ingredients, we know that they prepare some foods that we eat today, like carapulcra, mazamorra morada, arroz con leche, and others. The Asian influence in the Peru began in the 18th. In the 19th, we have very, very important the immigration of the Chinese people, the Japanese people, the Italian, and then the British. The British was very important. The French. That food influencing our style, and it's very important now. The Chinese influence, because 60% of the population of the Japanese colony have work in food and in hospitality. It's very strong. That's why there are many many restaurants and many styles of Japanese style.
But that cannot be traced then to the colonial period, because Iliana talked about the influence of the Galeón de Manila, no? And so you would say that the Asian influence in Peru is certainly more recent. Es mucho más reciente.
They're two different things, right? I mean, the Manila galleons were with the Spanish, and then the recent, like immigration of Asian people, like either Chinese or Japanese, we also have it in the coast of, the Pacific coast in Mexico, and that was because of the railings. They were building trains and, like the railroads for the trains. So that's when a lot of people from Asia came down. And that's an influence that I think Rosario is also mentioning, because we have the same in Baja California, Sinaloa, and all that area, even in Guerrero, in Mexico.
There are influence of the more strong in the 19th century of the Chinese and the Japanese, but the Peruvian go to Acapulco to buy all the things that came with the NOA of Manila. We have to go to Acapulco, buy all the things, and then take back to Lima. And in Lima was the center that was by to all South America. Lima was the center of all the business. It was like New York of South America.
I have one more question, because there's also one food that a ceviche, no, that it's shared by Mexico and Peru, but is differentiated as far as I could understand from your presentations. Is the difference is based on the chiles that you use, no, and of course the different fish that are available in these different geographies. But someone is asking if you could say more about the chicharrón, and what is the difference between the chicharrón made in Peru versus the one made in Mexico?
It's the spicy of the ají amarillo. The ají amarillo or chile, yellow chile, is the ADN of
pero me preguntan sobre el chicharrón, ¿qué es lo que caracteriza el chicharrón en Perú?
El modo como se adereza con ají amarillo.
Okay, so she's saying that it's flavored with ají, with yellow ají, and we don't have that in Mexico. Iliana.
No, we don't have that kind of chile in Mexico. And no, and I think it's a little bit different, the question. The chicharrón in Mexico is made with the outer skin of the pork, and it has been dried for several days, and then slow fried, and then finally fried again. So it's twice fried at least. And you get a very crispy, crunchy, and also like air bubbled skin of the chicharrón. That is the chicharrón in Mexico. But the chicharrón in Peru is something else. So Rosario,
yes,
you
it's
can go with
different.
that.
In the chicharrón, first in water was cooked very slowly, and then is fried. It's fried in his own in his own lark, and it's crispy outside, and it's very soft inside.
So it's different, and I think both of them are very yummy. But you know, the one in Mexico also, it is used to feel, gorditas and tacos, and or it's different.
That is
El chicharrón prensado is different.
The chicharrón prensado, and also we have the other chicharrón that is more eaten in the north part of Mexico. That is kind of the fat pieces that fell when they are making carnitas or something. All that little fats, they're also used as a chicharrón. So that's more meaty than the other ones. One thing that I was thinking when Rosario was talking about the ceviche is that the main difference, at least for me, we cook a bunch of ceviches. We have one different ceviche every week in the restaurant, for example, with different ingredients and such. So it's more open to many things. But one main difference that I found from the Peruvian ceviche and the Mexican one is the leche de tigre in the Peruvian ceviche. That is kind of the protein that began to be cooked by the cook. Again, it's not cooked really, but cooked in lime juice or any acidic, and they save it and they present it either in the ceviche or elsewhere, like making drinks out of it or something. But the leche de tigre is a very important component of the Peruvian ceviche that actually we don't use in Mexico. Ours is either more fresh, but even though if we serve a ceviche that it has been cooked for many hours, we discard that. We don't keep that protein juice, with the lime. Okay, so I think that is a very important differentiation between the Mexican ceviche and the Peruvian one.
Yeah, the Peruvian then is thicker, right, Rosario? It would be.
Yes.
Yeah. Okay, so I think it's very interesting, how you both of you talked about the combination of ingredients that came together in very different foods, from, I guess, the different traditions. I think it's time to wrap up. I think we would have time to talk more. I want to invite people listening to this and who are in Austin to visit El Naranjo. The enchiladas are particularly good. It made me homesick every time I go there. And we have a couple of Peruvian restaurants in Austin as well. Lima Criolla is one of them, and you can go and try some of the very tasty dishes that Rosario referred to. But now we have to leave it here. That's all for tonight's conversation. Thank you all for joining us. Before we go, there are quick reminders. Let me just say thank you to Rosario and to Iliana for their presentations. And I want to invite everybody
Thank you so much.
To next month's Distinguished Visiting Speaker Series. We will be discussing or talking about the building the Spanish Americas from classical architecture to the Bohío with Dr. Paul Neal from Florida State University and Dr. Luis Javier Cuesta from Universidad Iberoamericana in Mexico City. I also would like to invite you to our November curated conversations that will go around an exhibition that is soon to be open at the Blanton. The title is Pop Goes Politico in the Americas. So it's a very interesting show that will expand our notion of what pop art is, and it will address its politic sides. And here's a little tease of something we're very, very excited to announce. Next month, you will be able to visit our Spanish Americas galleries from your computer. So if you are not in Austin, you can still enjoy it. We're preparing an online tour, a 360 visit to the exhibition that it's about to close. And we have a lot of construction going on, so you may miss the galleries of the Spanish Americas, but you still can enjoy it from your computer or in your computer. And that is for all, but I would like to remind you that if you would like to show your support for the museum, you can become a member at blantonmuseum.org/membership. And you can sign up for our Blanton newsletter at blantonmuseum.org subscribe to always be in the know about what is happening at the museum. We try to do very different activities for different audiences, from the young ones to the not so young. And finally, if you have enjoyed tonight's event, please help us continue to bring quality programming to the community by making a donation at blantonmuseum.org. Pay what you wish. We really thank you, our speakers, and we thank you, our audience, to always be here with us and learn about art and culture in these various ways. Thank you so much. Have a great night, and I hope you enjoy a nice dinner inspired by our conversation.